Pilots of Reddit, what has been a scary moment of which the passengers were blissfully unaware? Flocks of birds like to appear out of the grass when rolling down a runway for takeoff. It happens a lot more than passengers would like to know, but usually it's a non-event. Every once in a while though, the flock will appear right in front of us near rotation speed, and we just hope they're gone by the time we're moving through that space. Don't worry if the plane crashes in the middle of the ocean, you will most likely starve or drown. Got struck by lightning the other day. That wasn't fun. Scared the life out of the both of us. Radar wasn't painting anything either. I was in a plane that was hit by lightning, and for sure the passengers were aware that something was going down. Two big flashed, rough ride through the clouds, a huge thump. It was scary. After a few minutes we were above the clouds, in the sun. I saw a couple of people crying. Didn't know that we'd actually been hit by lightning until the pilot announced it. The plane was just fine and we continued on our way to our destination. Everyone was very happy to land safely. A little off topic, but as a passenger on a flight from LAX to the main island of Hawaii on United Flight 83, I plugged my earbuds into an armrest and found the channel that lets you listen to the pilots talking to the tower. About 100 miles out, they were getting in line and the tower called us, United 93. I got a cold chill. The pilots murmured, the tower called back referring to us as United 83, and everything moved along. I could just tell that everyone involved with that conversation just felt sick. You can listen to the ATC channel by plugging in your earbuds into the armrest? Used to be able to on United, not sure anymore. If your captain is telling you to remain calm because there is going to be some turbulence, then there is going to be some turbulence. But if he ends that sentence with cabin crew be seated, then tragedy is about to go down. I was on a transatlantic flight when during the middle of passing out a dinner, the pilot said we were about to hit heavy turbulence and asked the flight attendants to suspend dinner service. And, of course, for everyone to fasten their seatbelts. A few minutes later, we hit heavy chop, and then we plane suddenly dropped. Some things went flying. My dinner tray went up to the air to near my head. I grabbed it before it spilt on me. A guy 3 rows in front of me wasn't wearing his seatbelt and went slamming into the seat in front of him and got a bloody nose. After the turbulence stopped, the flight attendants went through to check on people. The guy with the bloody nose told her what happened and she said, "That is why we told you to put on your seatbelt," and she kept on walking. Not a pilot, but I was a passenger when I overheard a flight attendant speaking to another saying, "They're gonna try fly over it." Shortly after, the pilot announced we would be experiencing some turbulence from a nearby storm. They weren't kidding. That thing hit the plane so hard we had to make an emergency landing in Louisiana. Apparently some electrics were damaged and we had to switch planes. When I was a passenger on a flight, we had to try go over some turbulence. Ended up at 45k feet. My dad has been a commercial pilot for 35 years, and the only thing he recalls that fits here was, a couple of decades ago, old turboprop he was flying. A severe buildup of ice that meant even at full throttle, Flapsy was losing altitude. This quickly turned into a pan call, followed by a mayday a few minutes later. Everything was fine, however he did watch them take the ice off the front of the plane after they landed. The nose cone ice came off in one piece and was so thick he couldn't see through it. Also heard of a pilot who had to land an old turboprop plane by looking through an open window as the ice buildup on the windows was so severe to see through. Scary. I hauled my motorcycle in the bed of my truck in snowstorm 2015. 1/4 inch thick ice built up in front of the motorcycle. That's just in highway speeds. Not a pilot, but I was on a flight about a year ago in Queensland, New Zealand. Smooth flight there with no turbulence. All of a sudden, on approach to land, we hear the call for everyone to strap in and for the flight attendants to be seated. We came into some crazy crosswinds. It took 3 attempts to land and still came in pretty much sideways. The pilot was super chilled about it though, seemed like he had it under control. The weather over the Darrells going into Queensland can get intense, but so worth it, the most beautiful approach I've ever experienced. You should try flying around the area in light aircraft. It was a rough ride, haha. A few of my college roommates were commercial pilot majors. It was not uncommon to be woken up on a Saturday and told we were flying 6 states away today. One particular time, I remember being about 10,000 feet over the Mississippi River when my friend Paul says, "Hey, look at that!" just before stalling the engines and falling 1,000 feet in a matter of seconds. All the while, he is fighting the choke, and I watched as the propeller stopped. It is not a good feeling to have been flying for 3 hours with the constant roar of the plane engine not 4 feet in front of you, to sudden engine silence, and the deafening roar of wind going by as you are falling hundreds of feet per second. Freaked the life out of me, but apparently restarting a stalled aircraft is something you must do to get a license. He did it 3 more times that day. It's not actually the engine that stalls, it's the wings and the airflow around them. I get what you're saying, but I guess just FYI. Military pilot here. Can't speak for my commercial bros, but most things that break are minor, and for the more serious stuff, your pilot is more than overqualified to handle it. From my experience, sharing airspace with the bus drivers, most airliners will take precautions to make sure a bad situation, though minor, doesn't get worse. I.e., my buddy's flight across the pond came back for a bad smell in the cockpit. Maybe something is burning, maybe somebody had a peculiarly acrid fart, who knows? Most times, my crew is unaware of the particulars of how close we came to smashing that bird I narrowly avoided. Could count the feathers on that guy. Large commercial planes have MMELs, hundreds of pages long, essentially a list of failures that can be tolerated when dispatched. Further failures may occur in flight, and it may still be perfectly safe to fly. For anyone who's curious, there is an interesting series called Mayday Air Crash Investigation, which details many of the terrible crashes and accidents over the years. I have a terrible fear of flying, but honestly, seeing these and how they correct the issue has helped me get over it. So many safety issues were corrected and created to solve the problems over the years, but some of them still just horrify me. My favorite was one with Avianca Airlines. They flew from South America to New York City. Because it was snowing, they were forced to hold for 3 hours plus, and they issued a fuel emergency. The ATC radioed back, "Affirmative, please proceed to Boston, good night." 15 minutes later, they literally dropped out of the sky. I've flown something close to 2 million miles, but I've only had one flight where I was legitimately scared. The turbulence was like nothing I've ever experienced, and the captain started briefing us every 5 minutes. Even then, I was still okay. But then the captain said, with real concern in his voice, thus ending my bliss, "Well, that didn't work. We're going to try something else." Then the plane nosed down really frighteningly sharply. We were all semi-weightless for about 30 seconds. Not a pilot, but I do work for an airline. I was doing a project at our house in LGA and had to fly home to my native Indianapolis, and my only option was to deadhead with a few crew members from my airline back home. I was sitting by myself in first class on an empty plane, save for one pilot, 3 flight attendants, plus the 2 guys flying the plane. Upon landing, we hit the runway really hard and bounced. I didn't think anything of it as I've flown on aeroplanes hundreds of times. However, the captain flying the plane looked white as a ghost and told me he almost flipped us. Not a pilot, but I was once a passenger on a particularly scary landing in New Orleans. We were flying through the darkest, scariest rainstorm I could imagine, with a lot of turbulence. It was scary enough that we just seemed to keep turning and turning, but I couldn't see the end of the wing out the windows due to the rain. When the wheels hit pavement and we started towards the gate, everyone started turning on their cell phones. It was like a great chorus went up as each one connected and immediately made the tornado alert sound. We'd landed during a tornado warning. I was flying in Denver once and the turbulence was horrible on our descent. I can see the landing and we got maybe 50 feet from the ground, and suddenly the plane heads right back up again. A tornado had dropped down right next to the airport. We rerouted to Albuquerque and had to wait a couple of hours there for the weather to change. I was one of those people who cried. I was flying an old Cessna 172 into Harbor Springs with my dad as my passenger. To my right, we were riding up drafts from the wind off of Lake Michigan coming up the trees. The second we got past the first tree line, the updraft stopped, and we start sinking fast. At this point, I've got full power and try to pitch up enough to at least maintain level flight with the stall horn starting to chill in the background. With the airspeed picking up, I managed to stabilize the approach and bring it down. Once on the ground, my dad was none the wiser on how close we were to being another statistic. OT, but those of you who suffer with every bump in an aircraft, never accept a seat in the rear of the plane. Movement is noticeably accentuated back there. I was in a rearmost seat last year when my flight hit nasty turbulence and it felt like a carnival ride. Can confirm was on a small jet for domestic flight, hit some wintry turbulence which caused the plane to toss the cabin quite a bit. I was getting up to use the bathroom before we hit, and just as I was getting ready to stand up, we hit the first pocket. I ended up hitting my head on the roof bit where the call button and lights are. It was spectacular. The flight attendant looked scared for my sake, and they were meant with the biggest eating grin, and we responding with, "Thought it only happened in movies. The bathroom can wait."